everybody, to another great edition of the ABNF Podcast. I'm here with my buddy Nick. Nick, we are still about a month away from the NBA season, so we still got that dead period right now. I know the NFL just kicked off this past weekend, and before I let you go, I do just want to say one thing. Today is the remembrance of all those who passed away on September 11th of 2001. So I want to quickly take a moment of silence right now for all those who we lost that day. And I just want to say to Nick that, we definitely are very lucky to be where we are right now. And everybody that lost somebody that day, our prayers are still with your families to this day. So
absolutely.
But Nick, in brighter news today, what are we going to be going over?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about NBA trades that have happened throughout the last decade or so. Certain teams that had some really, really bad trades that still haunt their franchise to this day. And we're just going to go through some trades that we think were bad for those franchises that are still being haunted by them to this day. So
there's definitely a lot of trades out there. I think for anybody that is listening to this, they're definitely going to remember some of these trades.
Yep.
I think the first one for sure is one that people are going to remember very well. And there's going to be definitely some that we all still clown on to this day. You see people on Twitter still making fun of some of these teams for those trades.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we'll start off with the Atlanta Hawks.
All right.
I mean, in the 2018 NBA draft, they traded Luka Doncic to the Dallas Mavericks for Trae Young and a future first round pick. That pick ended up being Cam Reddish the following year.
Irony.
So pretty much they gave up Luka for Trae Young and Cam Reddish. So overall, I mean, I understand the Hawks have made the Eastern Conference Finals and stuff, but now the Mavs have made it to the NBA Finals. Luka's been to a conference finals multiple times now. Luka's just by far a better player. Just what it came down. It's just what it comes down to. That's really it.
I mean, when you revisit that trade and look at the time, the fact that Atlanta wanted to trade up, or actually no, Dallas traded up and Atlanta agreed to trade back. It's kind of crazy. I think that the biggest problem is that people don't trust European players. And I feel like Atlanta thought that it was not worth drafting Luka. But, I mean, if you would think about it, Sacramento drafted Marvin Bagley before.
That's true.
And they could have.
First round pick was DeAndre Ayton, the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, so, I mean, we can fault the Hawks for what they did, but there were two other teams that definitely could have had Luka, and they just chose not to. So, looking back at that trade, not so hot. Nick, I don't think a lot of people know this one, but Boston, back in 2020, had a 3-team trade that actually traded away Desmond Bane. The Grizzlies ended up acquiring that draft pick to get Desmond Bane, and then really all Boston got in the return with this trade was 2023 and 2025 second-round picks. Now, I'm going to tell you the other 2 picks that the Boston Celtics had that year in the 2020 draft. They selected Aaron Nesmith, who's currently on the Pacers. And then the only guy that's on their team is Peyton Pritchard at number 26. So I'm sure that if the Celtics, who already are really deep and probably going to go on another run this year, could have had Desmond Bane.
Can you imagine Desmond Bane just coming off the bench for Boston?
That'd be nasty, man. I mean, a 7th or 8th option off the bench right now, bro. You got Derek White coming off there. Freaking...
nuts.
It's
team is nuts.
Yeah, that team is nasty, man. But I some of these trades that we're gonna look through, man. I just know that a lot of these are gonna be draft day trades, so it's gonna be ironic to see how bad some of these teams did.
Yeah. The next trade probably goes down as one of the worst trades in NBA history, if not the worst trade in NBA history. I'll let the fans decide that one, but. The trade. Here's this trade, man. The Brooklyn Nets and Boston Celtics, man. They traded Keith Bogans, Marshawn Brooks, Chris Humphries, Chris Joseph, Gerald Wallace, 3 first-round picks. A first-round pick swap to the Boston Celtics for Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Jason Terry, DJ White, and a future second-round pick. What's nuts is those 2 out of those 3 first-round picks, because there was first-round picks for 2014, 16, and 18, that being Tatum and Brown.
And they also gave up a pick that became Damian Lillard for an aging Gerald Wallace.
Yep.
So, again, retrospect of that trade, the Nets at that time were trying to be all in on the Joe Johnson, Darren Williams core. And I think that trade just was a desperation move of thinking that you had these guys who were just coming off of basically a year prior to almost going back to the NBA Finals, pushing that Miami Heat Big Three team to 7 games.
Yep.
So at the time you get it, but it's crazy because they actually only ended up being in Brooklyn for 1 year together. They won 44 games, and then they were a second-round exit. And guess who they were a second-round exit to? The Miami Heat. So I got to ask you, Nick, in terms of trades that definitely debilitated a franchise, do you think that's the worst one?
It's up there. But I would say I think the Paul George one might be worse.
Yeah, I think if that Paul George trade never happens, I think we still would talk about the Brooklyn trade more. I mean, we still do, but not to the extent of like that Paul George trade, especially now with Paul George
that was
gone.
For like one player though. The Nets got 4 players in that trade. It wasn't just one.
Yeah, I think the other thing too was that they were old. I think that was like one of the confusions, and I think Boston just wasn't going to move them for just anything. So Danny Ainge definitely was like, "Look, if you give me all this stuff, like I'll give them to you gladly."
Yeah,
man. All right. So the next one, Nick, I don't know if a lot of people know this, and again, this is where the Clippers were smart. But the Charlotte Hornets traded SGA to the Clippers for Miles Bridges and 2 future second-round picks back in the 2018 draft.
Yep.
And I forgot that it was a trade that ended up getting the Clippers SGA. And now seeing this again, I do remember that. Mm-hmm. But just to think about this now, SGA got traded from the Hornets to the Clippers then trading him to the Thunder, and he ends up becoming a star. Where have we heard that before for the Hornets? Ring a bell? Another guard, played in LA.
Why can't I think right now? I can't think right now. Hornets that played in LA.
If you faded away and you're shooting
obviously Chris Paul, right? You're not talking about Chris Paul, though.
I am not talking about Chris Paul. I am talking about you're in elementary school, you got the paper basket. What are you going to say when you try and shoot into the trash
Kobe.
can? There you go.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to say it, but...
that's... Wow, yeah, I remember Kobe did get drafted. And what sucks, too, not only they traded SGA, but those 2 second-round picks end up being Vernon Carey Jr. and Scotty Lewis, which they really haven't had. They didn't really do anything in the NBA.
I'm just going to ask, who?
Ooh, exactly. Well, Vernon Carey Jr. was a Dookie.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I know, because I'm a diehard Duke fan, and he was one of the best players in college.
Mm-hmm.
Scotty Lewis, I don't know where he went in college. I don't remember, but that trade was SGA's been involved in. Why do you gotta do that to my boy like that, bro? They disrespected the hell out of that man.
Hey, bro, they disrespected him twice, so he said, "I'm gonna leave it nice, and I'm gonna cook in OKC." I'm not a rapper.
Shout out to Sam Presti, man, for pulling. Amazing
You're going to
moves.
see more. There's going to definitely be some retrospect trades we're looking in here.
Yeah.
And I think that one's there, but there's more trades where you're going to see OKC getting involved.
This next one, Graham, I hate to bring this up because this is our team, the Chicago Bulls. They traded Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., 2 first-round picks to Orlando. We did acquire Nikola Vucevic and Alfred Kuminu. That ended up backfiring on us real quick because one of those first-round picks ended up being Franz Wagner.
Yeah.
And right now, personally, I'd rather have Wendell Carter Jr. right now over Nikola Vucevic.
Yeah. I think at the time when this trade went down, they were trying to really convince Zach LaVine to stay and to build around him.
Yeah.
And I'm not defending this trade now because obviously look at what it's gotten us, nothing.
I'm not gonna lie, Bulls fans were happy about this trade at the time. I was for sure.
I definitely was because when you think about it, that season he was averaging 21.5 points, 11.5 rebounds, and about 4 assists, and he was an all-star that year too. Yeah. So it's just kind of hard to say, like the trade didn't make sense. But retrospect again. You could have had a younger center in Wendell Carter, who I think still the biggest problem with Wendell Carter is that he's just not he's not big in terms of his frame, so bigger centers can bully him, but that did the same thing to Vooch. So even though Vooch is bigger, they still bullied him. Franz Wagner, man, I wish that we had him, bro, because he's better than he's got the size that we badly need. So
yeah, he would definitely would have been a cornerstone piece, man, for sure.
I don't think there's anything else though to that one that I can tell you. I think Dallas. Now, I think what they gave to get Kristaps wasn't necessarily bad. I mean, an older DeAndre Jordan, Wesley Matthews, Dennis Smith Jr., and then 2 future first-round picks. And ironically, Dennis Smith Jr., I remember Stephen A. Smith was criticizing for the Knicks for not drafting Dennis Smith Jr., DSJ, a couple years prior. So it was just funny because he was so pissed that they drafted Frank Ntilikina.
Yep.
And I'm just looking at this. I mean, what they got back was Kristaps, Trey Burke, Tim Hardaway Jr., who's been part of the... He's been bounced from the Knicks to the Mavs, and then he went back to the Knicks, and then he went back to the Mavs.
Yeah, so very interesting.
It's actually kind of funny. And then Courtney Lee. I mean, Courtney Lee at that time was kind of at the end of his, getting towards the end of his career.
Yep.
So I think, I don't know. This one I don't really feel became really much. Those draft picks, don't even know if they've actually been used yet.
It just didn't really help both teams down the line because, the Mavericks ended up trading Porzingis to the Wizards, and they didn't even get much.
They got Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You gave, at the time, everyone was saying it was a haul to get Kristaps Porzingis at the time.
I mean, I look at what they gave up, and it didn't really become much. And DeAndre Jordan has been a journeyman now. He's been literally bounced around from multiple teams. Yeah. Wesley Matthews, same thing, journeyman. Nothing crazy. Dennis Smith Jr. never really did much after that. Mm-hmm. The first-round picks, I'm sure, have probably been used for that Mikal Bridges trade.
Yeah.
And KP never really was able to be healthy on the Mavs. And like you said, didn't really benefit either team.
No, yeah.
Ironically, now KP is an NBA champion and ended up beating his former team. So look at that.
Yep.
All right, Nick.
The next one, I don't think a lot of people even know. I mean, shit, I forgot about this one. Back in, another trade during the draft. Look what happens. The Nuggets drafted Donovan Mitchell. They traded him to Utah for Tyler Lydon and Trey Lyles. Imagine Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, and Nikola Jokic right now in the Nuggets.
That'd be nasty, man. That would be nasty. If they could have had Donovan Mitchell
my God,
this past year, that would have helped them so much.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in that series against the
Minnesota.
The Timberwolves in the second round. I mean, that definitely would have helped them for sure.
Yep.
I think that it's ironic, too, that this is probably one of the trades that Denver would regret because if you think about it now, a lot of things that they have done have been the positive direction. They took Michael Porter Jr. as a risk, but he kind of fell because of his back.
Yep.
Ended up being a great sharpshooter for them. You end up keeping Nikola Jokic over Jusuf Nurkic because they had both of the guys on the team at the same time. They ended up moving off Nurkic and kept Jokic. And then obviously I know that they had Emmanuel Mudiay already, but then taking Jamal Murray. Mm-hmm. This is one of those ones that, I'm sure when you look at it, you probably would rather have taken that back. But I don't think anybody knew that Donovan Mitchell was going to become what he did maybe at that time. Mm-hmm. So, it's not. Donovan Mitchell still hasn't won an NBA championship, and the Nuggets did win the title. So I can't really say much on that one.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, even during Mitchell's time in Utah, he became a 4-time All-Star.
He did.
You know what I mean?
And they had the best record the one year.
Lydon and Lyles were both out of Denver by 2019. So
and Lyles also ironically ended up coming on to the Jazz again. Yep. So I think that it's nothing crazy. Like that one's not crazy. But I think this next one though, Nick.
Yeah.
The Detroit Pistons definitely would rather take back that Brandon Jennings trade all those years ago in July of 2013. Mm-hmm. You know, we were in high school at the time, and we didn't know who Chris Middleton was. Yeah. You knew who Brandon Knight was because of his college career and
the missed layup.
Yeah, and ironically, he actually made that missed layup when he was in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And then Brandon Jennings, who I always say with one of my buddies, he peaked in Game 3 of his career. He went off for 50 points, and that was probably his best game of his whole career.
Yeah.
Didn't really do much. I don't know what the Pistons were doing at the time. Do you remember that they also had Josh Smith?
Sure, they did.
They had a very weird team. Greg Monroe, Josh Smith, Brandon Jennings. Mm-hmm. They were really just trying to find an identity that didn't exist. Yeah. Andre Drummond was on the team too. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. But can you believe though that Milwaukee at that time didn't realize that they thought their core was when they traded for Monte Ellis, and then they had some other pieces there too. Mm-hmm. They traded for J.J. Redick at the trade deadline.
Yes, they did.
They had a couple guys, and it's just kind of funny that because they got rid of Bogut, mm-hmm. and then Chris Middleton, who is a no-name at the time, is going to end up being in about 7-8 years later your second best player on your championship team.
Yeah.
So, what do you got about this one?
Well, for the Chris Middleton one?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just typical Detroit doing Detroit things.
Yeah.
Especially as of recently now. They brought back Tobias Harris for literally no reason. I mean, it's bad with Detroit right now. It's really, really bad. I feel bad for Kate Cunningham. I mean, they gave Monty Williams a whole boatload of money to coach this team.
And then said, you out after one season.
Literally out after one season.
That's become a common thing in the NBA, too. The one year you sign, then they dump you if you're not working out with them.
It's crazy. They have no patience with coaches now, bro.
What if that happens to Coach Bud after 1 year with the Suns? It's possible.
That is possible. That is very interesting.
Yeah, I think this one, again, kind of a straightforward trade. Just the fact that Detroit had him, and like you said, Detroit doing Detroit things.
Yeah.
No surprise here.
Yeah, no surprise at all. Next one I want to bring up is the Houston Rockets.
Oh, yes.
In the 2019 offseason, obviously Daryl Morey is always desperate. He's always in win-now mode.
Yep.
This is what he does. The trade. Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook trade. Everyone remembers that.
Oh, of course. How can you not?
Obviously, Chris Paul, 2 first-round picks and 2 first-round pick swaps went to Oklahoma just for Russell Westbrook.
So, I remember when this trade went down, and a lot of people felt like that was the end of Chris Paul's career right there.
Yeah.
They had 2 chances to win against the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, the 2017-2018 season, that was the one where they were up 3-2. Chris Paul gets hurt in Game 5, right? And the excuse that year was, well, if Chris Paul was healthy, we would have beat them.
Yeah.
If he doesn't go down with a hamstring injury, we're beating them in 6. Mm-hmm. That is what they claimed because that game was going back home to them. Or I'm sorry, that game was in Golden State, and then they had Game 7 at home. And then 2019, Kevin Durant goes out in the second round, and they're not able to close the deal. And again, Chris Paul and James Harden at that time were already beefing. It just seemed like Chris Paul was at the tail end of his career. And then Russell Westbrook, because of the Paul George trade, which I know we're going to talk about in this, because there is no way you can't talk about that trade.
You have to talk about that trade for sure.
Do you feel that this trade helped revitalize Chris Paul's career?
I think so. Because look at what he did with the Oklahoma team. I think I remember going into the year, they didn't give Oklahoma any hope to make the playoffs.
Nope.
They ended up making the playoffs.
Or 5th seed that year.
Yeah.
And the thing, too, was that Chris Paul was an all-star.
Yep.
In OKC. So I think that ironically ended up being a trade that I think benefited more Chris Paul. I don't think it benefited necessarily either team. It actually probably hurt both teams because in the long run, like Chris Paul leaves, right? But he revives his career. He guides SGA a little bit, as a young guy,
out there,
right?
Yeah,
and
then what he's doing with San Antonio now.
Yeah, and I mean, like you're gonna see. I mean, Chris Paul gets that nice contract with the Suns. Continues to keep his prime open for a little bit longer. So I think that was a trade that really just helped Chris Paul.
Yeah.
Next trade. Now, Nick, if you were living under a rock in 2011, there was a draft night swap that happened with the Pacers and Spurs, which produced Kawhi Leonard. Now, Kawhi Leonard, Davis Bertans, and Ezra Lorbeck went to the Spurs for a point guard named George Hill, who, ironically, was also on the Bucks. Has not done shit in his career. Sorry, but it's true. He didn't do shit in his career. For a two-time NBA champion, Kawhi Leonard. How do you feel about that one, man?
Defensive player of the year multiple years, I believe.
Yes. Biggest hands in the game.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a fun guy.
Yeah, I mean, Kawhi Leonard, at the peak, he's one of the best two-way players I think this game has ever seen. Really, to be honest with you. And, of course, it's just another masterclass move by a great Spurs organization. Greg Popovich is Greg Popovich. It would have been interesting. It's funny because he would have been teammates with Paul George. They ended up being teammates anyways.
In LA.
And that ended up being an epic failure. Who knows what would have happened in Indiana? Because Paul George at that time was Paul George.
Yeah.
That's when he was at his best. And those two together, young, two-way defenders, oh my Lord, man, they would have been very good in Indiana. A damn good team in Indiana.
What would have been scary too was at that time, Indiana was really good, and that was when they were competing against those Miami teams.
Yeah.
Dude, you have a young Kawhi Leonard with them? Shit.
Yeah, Roy
that would have been good. That would have been nasty, man.
Dan Granger was on that team.
Do you know what that would have reminded me of? Those early 2000s Pacers teams, very gritty teams, defensive minded teams.
Yeah.
And you got a guy like Paul George. I think Paul George, if Kawhi had stayed in Indiana, I don't know if he ever would have become the guy he was on San Antonio and then Toronto.
Yeah.
I think he would have been a really good lockdown defender. Would the offensive game have gone there? I don't know, because Paul George was the best player on that team. So that would have been interesting.
Yeah. Very, very interesting for sure. Okay, the next one, it's the Clippers-Oklahoma trade.
Come on, Nick, you got to tell us what happened.
Look what happened, man. Danilo Gallinari, SGA, 5 first-round picks, 2 first-round pick swaps to Oklahoma for Paul George. Clippers, what were you thinking, man? I understand that you pretty much traded all that to get both Kawhi and Paul George, because Kawhi goes, I ain't coming to LA unless if you get my guy Paul George. That's how that trade ended up happening. But 7 first-round picks? 5 first-round picks, but 2 of them were pick swaps.
So still you gave up 7 picks. In theory, you're giving up 7 picks.
In theory, you're giving up 7 picks, and SGA is literally an MVP candidate. It seems like he's going to be an MVP candidate for at least the next 5 years. And obviously, they made it to one Western Conference Finals, Kawhi and Paul George. I think, wasn't Kawhi Leonard out?
Yeah, he was out. He got hurt in the second round against Utah.
And then they did the choke job during the bubble. Everyone knows what happened.
It was the only year that they could have won.
The side of the backboard. Things like that. So, it just became an epic failure. They let Paul George walk. Didn't even give him a contract extension, really. They negotiated a little bit, but according to Paul George on his pod, it's like they didn't really want to bring him back.
They basically said, here's this offer. This is what we're going to give you. We're not going to go to what we gave Kawhi.
Yeah.
And we're going to leave it at that. I agree with you, though, Nick. I think that this trade kind of speaks for itself. 5 first-round picks, 2 first-round pick swaps.
And then Oklahoma ends up getting the best player in the deal.
Yeah, Oklahoma does get the best player in the deal because Paul George, while at the time he was third in MVP voting, he was not going to be the player that SGA is now.
Yeah.
I would also say, though, the crazy part about one of those picks ended up being that turned into Jalen Williams. And Jalen Williams is an emerging young star as well. Second best player right now in OKC, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I know that Chet's good, but I think that Jalen Williams is a little more established right now.
Yep.
So the Clippers could have had both SGA and Jalen Williams just based on these picks. And the other thing too, Nick, is they still owe them picks. They owe them picks in 2026, and they still owe them a swaps right in 2025. So
this trade's still not complete yet.
It's still not completed, and Paul George is going to be playing for the Philadelphia 76ers this year. So I don't really have to explain much more than, the Clippers being the Clippers.
Yep.
Now,
epic failure for sure.
Now, Nick, it's not like they were the only LA team that made a huge mistake. And I think that this one, if we look back at this trade, I would say the impact of what it did was you took away a championship core and you got Russell Westbrook. So you traded KCP, Montrezl Harrell, and Kyle Kuzma. Reminder, KCP was your third best player the year you win the championship. Kyle Kuzma was one of your cornerstones. Montrezl Harrell was a good addition that you added after he left the Clippers for you. You got Russell Westbrook and 3 second-round picks. And off the bat, everybody said, where's the shooting? There's no shooting. Nobody on this team can shoot. They said, it's fine. We're going to just sign a bunch of old dudes, and we're going to sign Wayne Ellington. We'll be fine. Obviously, that did not turn out the way they wanted to.
No, not at all. That's just crazy. It's like you gave up the only shooting you actually had on this team for someone that can't shoot when you already knew you lacked in that area. Even when they had KCP, Kyle Kuzma, like, this team wasn't a good three-point shooting team anyways. You know what I mean? And Kyle Kuzma was young. He was, ascending. KCP, man, ends up being a huge piece to not only that Lakers championship team during the bubble, but the Nuggets championship team as well. I think he's on Orlando now, right?
Yeah, he signed with Orlando.
Teach a lot of those young guys how to play. That was a good signing by the Magic. I like that
was a really good signing. I thought that they were going to get Paul George.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. I would say this too, Nick, before we go to the next one. One of the other things, too, about this trade is that even though they were able to, for the most part, reverse that trade because Danny Ainge gave them mercy and said, sure, we'll trade with you.
Yeah.
It becomes a 3-team trade where they get D'Lo, they get Malik Beasley, they get Jared Vanderbilt. Both D'Lo and Jared Vanderbilt are still on the Lakers. So, ironically, and they made the Western Conference Finals that year when they did that trade.
Yeah.
So, they basically took back Russell Westbrook. They gave him back. Said, not our problem anymore. Brought in these guys, were able to kind of get away from that whole Westbrook era where people aren't talking about it anymore because the Lakers have made the playoffs the last 2 years. So, irony right there, right?
No, very interesting.
Okay, so the next one, Nick. What is the next trade that we're gonna look at?
But this is actually kind of a funny one because I didn't even know Bojan Bogdanovic was on the Heat. When was he on the Heat? I had no idea. He got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Norris Cole. Very interesting.
I mean, Norris Cole...
Bogdanovic is a solid player, man.
He was.
Yeah.
I want to say that, and I'm reading this right here, he didn't come stateside until the 2014-2015 season, so I think they had his draft rights, but he never came over.
Yeah.
So they ended up just trading him. So even though we know who Bogdanovic became as a player, the fact that it was for Norris Cole is kind of wild. I think that is funny. I also think that if you just look at the names and you were like, really? But I get it. I think the next one, though, Nick, is even funnier. So, who's Grievous Vasquez to you?
And to be honest with you, I didn't remember at that point, but he was just a guy that just had a lot of injuries in his career, man. I mean, his career averages, I believe he only averaged like 9 points per game, just under 5 assists in his career. He was a guy that got picked in the first round of a draft, I believe, right? It just ended up not panning out,
Yeah, and the thing too was that he had just gotten traded to the Raptors 2 seasons prior from Sacramento. Mm-hmm. But if you want to believe this, the Bucks actually had Norman Powell, and they gave up a future first-round pick to get Grievous Vasquez because I remember they needed a guard and they were just kind of desperate. Mm-hmm. So after that 2013 trade in which the Bucks had sent Tobias Harris to the Magic for J.J. Redick, which they got half a season of J.J. Redick, right? They end up making this trade in 2015. Now, you want to know who that first-round pick was?
OG Anunoby, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you could take that back, could you imagine? Now, let's just say you got Giannis, you got Chris Middleton, you got OG Anunoby, you got Norman Powell.
Yeah.
That's a nice core right there, man.
Yeah.
You know, that, even with Damian Lillard, bro, like, they have those two guys in the playoffs last season.
Yeah.
So, way different story we're talking about right here. Mm-hmm. I think that this one is another one where I think at the time, some of the players just, they needed that substance right there, and then just kind of didn't really become anything. Now, would you say right now, if the Bucks had never traded either of those pieces, do they become anything? Do you think that they become the players they do, or do you feel like they just kind of would have been left in the shadows, or Giannis?
They could have been. You see that sometimes with players that get left in the shadows, and when they go somewhere else, when they actually have an opportunity, like they become really, really good. You know, it's happened a lot. So, especially with OG Anunoby, I feel like, because he's not a guy where, like, he never really needs the ball in his hands to be, like, effective. But if he was in Milwaukee, I feel like he would have never
developed the way he did in
really
Toronto.
Developed that he did in Toronto. Exactly. Because Toronto, they didn't really have, like that star-level player. It was just, like, a bunch of solid players all around each other. Versus, like, the whole offense is based on Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, and at the time, too, Giannis was still developing. Because I would say the first season where we really saw the Giannis that we know today was at, like, 2016, 2017 mark, I would say. Probably 2017 for sure. Because I remember that was, like, the playoffs in 2017 where he's, like, jamming on people in Boston in the first round. I think that's a good point. Norman Powell ended up being a really important piece for the Toronto Raptors the year they won the NBA championship too. Yeah. I don't know if he becomes that player. I think there was a better system. I think that Milwaukee, as we've seen throughout history, their coaching staff has just kind of been a question mark. I feel like they had Bud for a while, which is the most consistency that they had. Then after that, it's just kind of been a Adrian Griffin question mark. Now we got Doc Rivers. Yeah. So, again, just one of those things.
No, for sure. Another trade. Oh my God, this is bad. This is so bad. Everyone knows about the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Come on, let's hype it up. Hype it up. Come on, man.
God,
come on, bro. Bad. It is the French eating croissant man. All right. We need to talk about this guy. Give it to me, Nick.
Yeah. So this is what happened, right? Obviously, Minnesota gets Rudy Gobert, but look how much they gave up, bro. Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Walker Kessler, Jared Vanderbilt, 4 first-round picks, first-round pick swap, and another player, I believe, that's on this trade as well. I don't really know much about, but that's not the point. Even if he was involved in this trade or not, I mean, you gave up 4 first-round picks, a first-round pick swap. Walker Kessler is solid. I think he's only going to continue to get better in his career. Obviously, you know, Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, they're just bouncing around the league now. Jared Vanderbilt's a good young player. I know he was hurt a lot last year. I think he could still be a very solid role piece on a very, very good championship caliber team. But, wow. That's all I got to say. A team was that desperate for Rudy Gobert, bro.
Hey.
That's crazy.
You know, the crazier part was
Danny Ainge did it again.
I think the crazier part is that Danny Ainge got more for Rudy Gobert than Donovan Mitchell.
Wow.
How is that possible?
Wow.
I think this trade will likely go down as one of those what the F trades was that in about 10 years, because while I think that Ant Edwards is amazing and he's going to continue to develop, I think that the way that Minnesota wins is not having Rudy Gobert on the floor. And it's been proven very easily.
Reed, man, is a better option.
Naz Reid is a better option.
Yeah.
You saw it, you literally have been seeing it. I mean, I can't be the only one that sees that Rudy Gobert is not the guy to put on the floor, especially in these situations too. Again, it's a situation they think that bringing in a defensive player of the year was going to solve their problems because a cat doesn't play defense. But the problem with Rudy Gobert is he has no offensive game.
Yeah, and he can't guard on the perimeter either. He's not one of those bigs where you can switch out. It's no problem. It's not like he's like a Bam on a bow. He can guard on the perimeter. You know what I mean? Yeah, just like you said, absolute no offensive game whatsoever. You don't have to worry about that man.
Oh, that guy's literally like a freaking statue, bro. All you got to do is just put your hands up, man.
Even during the Olympics, France was benching him late in ball games. Like, you can't have him. You literally cannot have him on the floor.
No, he's a liability.
Literally a liability. What do I tell you every year, man? You're not going to win a championship with Rudy Gobert as your starting center. It's just not going to happen. And you gave him so much for a guy that, just like you said, literally has no offensive game whatsoever. And we talked about this as soon as this trade happened. Minnesota got so desperate because they realized nobody was coming to Minnesota during the offseason, free agency-wise. So they felt like they had to overpay for somebody to bring for what they claimed to be a huge addition to the team.
And we're going to link that episode right now as we're doing this. If you're watching this or listening to this on YouTube, we have the link for that episode too. Because I do remember that we talked about that. Mm-hmm. Desperation was definitely something that Minnesota had to have because they're not a popular destination for free agents to sign to.
Yep.
I think that might change within time with Ant Edwards there. Mm-hmm. I think, though, again, they thought it was going to take Ant Edwards a couple more years to get where he's at right now, and he got there earlier than they expected.
Yep.
I think, too, to me, with this trade, I know this is a trade we're talking more about than some of the other ones that we did. I just think that this trade, because it's so recent still, compared to, because if you think about it, the Paul George trade was 5 years ago already. Mm-hmm. This one was only 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Like, I don't really understand what the hell they were thinking. It just doesn't add up to me. Like you said, not a starting center that you can win with. I don't think that he's worth the money that he's getting paid because you can only play him about 25 minutes in a game when it really matters, and probably less depending on the situation.
Yep.
I think that the two players, though, that they're going to really regret that they gave away were Jared Vanderbilt and then Walker Kessler. I don't know about the picks. I feel like picks can always go one or two ways. Yeah. Look, they got lucky. They have Jaden McDaniels. They got that in trade. Again, it's just kind of like where it's a trade-off.
They're stuck with him. That's the problem.
Well,
they want to get rid of him.
There's no way.
No one's taking it.
Nobody's taking a $46.7 million salary.
No, that's what I'm saying. Essentially, that's what he's going to make. I think that'll be the last year of his option. That's technically a player option where there's zero chance he won't pick that up. No, because no one's going to pay him that. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Who's gonna pick that up and say, yeah, I want to pay $46 million for that guy right there? Nick.
No, that's facts, man.
I think that this one is an interesting one that they put on here. This is the Pelicans because they were the Hornets at this time. If you remember, the New Orleans Hornets. Cannot talk, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Chris Paul. So this trade, and I mean, yeah, it was kind of a lopsided trade when you look back at it. So the Pelicans trade Chris Paul, a future second-round pick, and cash to the Los Angeles Clippers for Al-Farouq Amino, who at the time was a lottery pick, was supposed to be pretty solid.
Yeah.
Right? Eric Gordon, who was starting to become an established two-guard, was probably the best. He was probably the best player on the Clippers at that time.
Yeah.
Chris Kaman, who was their starting center and a first-round pick. Now, this was during the lockout time, and that was when you remember David Stern said, no, Chris Paul cannot go to the Los Angeles Lakers, vetoed that trade because the NBA owned the New Orleans Pelicans back then. And that is going to be something that when they look at what happened, the Clippers, once they got Chris Paul, became Lob City. Major attraction, really helped improve the image of the Clippers. Obviously, once Donald Sterling went out of the picture too, that helped clean up their brand a lot more. They were a better run organization. I just look at this. I mean, what do you think? because I think that this trade was definitely lopsided now.
Yep.
But since Chris Paul never won anything.
Yeah.
And the Pelicans ended up getting multiple first-round picks. Still, and what I mean by that is number one overall picks. They've still gotten a couple. It's they gave
that's true.
Zion.
I mean, the Clippers put together some really, really good years, really, really good teams. They just never were able to, get over the hump. But I feel like this trade really did help the Clippers in the long run. Just like you said, it attracted more talent willing to go to the Clippers. More people were engaged in watching the Clippers, especially in LA, because everyone was just talking about the Lakers at the time. But at that time, the Clippers were way better than the Lakers. The Lakers were really in that down period. Kobe was out, you know what I mean? They just didn't really have that much direction going on with the Lakers because they just wanted to hold on to Kobe at that time. Rest in peace, Kobe. But the Clippers, man, they had some loaded teams, man. With Chris Paul, with the Blake Griffins, DeAndre Jordan was good. They just had so much talent. Jamal Crawford was on those teams. I mean, I just think it really helped the Clippers in the long run. But just like we talked about, though, and didn't really get them to the promised land, no.
A lot of these trades didn't.
Yeah.
So I'm actually reading what the Lakers would have given in this trade. That it was a 3-team trade.
Yeah.
The Lakers would bring Lamar Odom, Kevin Martin, Luis Scola, Goran Dragic, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick to New Orleans.
Yeah.
I think that's a better package for New Orleans.
Yep.
I kind of don't get how they vetoed this
That
one, but not the other one, because I think it was just because Kobe Bryant was still in the prime of his career at that time, just recently coming off of an NBA championship the year before. But I'm looking at how much they would have had to give up.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Even with Chris Paul and Kobe Bryant, you had Paul Gasol still. Maybe you could put some fillers in.
Yeah.
You think that team would have won a championship?
I think so. I think both of those guards were young. Well, Kobe was a little older, but he was still in the prime of his career. Chris Paul at that time.
And they still had Andrew Bynum. I forgot.
Yeah, they still had Bynum too.
Actually, what the hell am I saying?
Yeah, the Lakers definitely would have. I don't know about multiple championships, but they would have won one.
I think they could have, especially at that time, because nobody was necessarily owning the league. LeBron had just lost with the Heat against the Dallas Mavericks team that really on paper had no business beating them.
Yeah.
So that is one for sure. Nick, let's go to the next one.
Yeah, so this one is very, very interesting because it involves the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Orlando Magic. Sam Presti does it again. I did not realize that Domantas Sabonis actually started off with the Orlando Magic in his career, which is very interesting because the Magic ended up trading Israel Ilyasova, Victor Oladipo, and Domantas Sabonis to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Serge Ibaka. Which that was very, 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 interesting because Serge was solid in his career. He was never elite. He was a pretty solid defender though. But that's when the salary cap erupted.
Yeah.
That's when the whole eruption happened. And but yeah, man, it's very interesting that Sam Presti was just always able to find young talent. Like Victor Oladipo was good with them. He ended up flipping him for something. Domantas Sabonis ended up growing a little bit. Then obviously he moves on. But, it's just look at how much young talent Sam Presti is able to get. I mean, look at the teams where they have Westbrook, Harden, KD, Reggie Jackson. I mean, the list goes. Jeff Green. I mean, look how good those players were. Now, they weren't that elite when they were there because they were all playing together. They were so young. But look at how good they ended up becoming.
So Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis get flipped the year after to get Paul George.
Yeah.
So, Sam Presti definitely has found ways to get talent from his guys that he drafted, and then their team developed and then became who they were. Because Serge Ibaka was part of that original OKC team with James Harden, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. Serge also ended up getting traded for Terrence Ross in 2017, because the Raptors needed a bigger guy to play against guys like LeBron in the East. So I remember that they did trade him. Oladipo and Sabonis ended up becoming great on Indiana.
Yep.
Now we see Sabonis in Sacramento. Still, at the time, if you think about it, he wasn't a household name when this trade happened. Orlando I have to give them this. They're always able to draft really good big men. It just always seems that they have an ability to do that. If you think about it.
Yeah.
Shaq, Dwight, you got Sabonis. I would say Franz Wagner, Mo Wagner. You got Paulo Banchero there. They didn't draft Wendell Carter. Wendell Carter's not bad. But I'm just thinking about, you got two really good centers that I'm thinking of right off the bat.
Yeah.
And then also getting, I don't think they drafted Vooch. I think they just traded for him.
I think they traded for him. I don't think they drafted him.
But just in general, it just seems to me that they always have this ability to get decent or draft good centers or acquire centers that are pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's just another thing too you got to think about. I think that they actually got Vooch when they traded away Dwight. I think that's how it went down.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. So let's go to the next one. So, Nick, I think that this one is going to haunt Philadelphia fans. You not only traded up with Boston to get the first overall pick, you still missed on the best player in the draft. Markelle Fultz was drafted first overall. Jason Tatum ended up being drafted at the original Sixers spot at the third, and then they traded a future first-round pick.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that pick ended up becoming Romeo Langford, so I thank God that pick didn't become something more.
From Indiana. He was actually cold at Indiana.
It could have been worse.
Yeah.
You could have had not only Jason Tatum, but could you imagine if they had drafted a really good young player that year? It would just kind of be another punch to the Sixers. And it's not the first time that they... No, I'm not going to say reach, because Ben Simmons was obviously the overall best player in that draft.
Everybody was going to pick him number one that year.
It just seems to me that Philadelphia goes back-to-back years with the number one pick. They had a number 3 pick when they took Embiid. It just seemed to me that at the time, injuries were definitely the number one thing that we kept seeing happening to Sixers draft picks.
Yep.
Markelle Fultz was not a stranger to this. How do you feel about Fultz? Do you think if that shoulder injury never happened, do you think we would be talking the way we do about this? Because apparently he was a really good shooter. So
at Washington, he was very, very good.
Yeah.
He was definitely the best player in college by far. Obviously, I think he averaged close to 22, 23 a game. In college, that's impressive. Yeah. There's not many guys that put up 20 a game in college. He did it in a good conference. But to me, Jason Tatum was... I felt like Markelle Fultz at the time, a lot of people would have picked him number 1 overall, but Jason Tatum, to me, was going to be the best player in this class.
He was the most NBA ready.
Yeah, look at the size on him. He could put the ball on the deck. He could shoot the 3. The length on him. You know what I mean? So, what I will say is, if he didn't have that shoulder injury, I think he would have been solid in the league. I don't know if he would ever became a bona fide every year all-star kind of player like Jason Tatum is today. But man, could you imagine if Tatum was at Philly? Damn.
The story would be a lot different.
Yeah. They would have won a championship by now. They would have won a championship.
Yeah, with Tatum and Embiid, I think that duo definitely could have.
Yeah.
We also don't know who they would have surrounded them with.
That's true too.
That's the other thing too.
Yeah.
Does Simmons end up... This is a really good what if. It's a lot different if you think about it. Simmons never would have had to been that 2 guy.
Yeah.
He could have been the guy that just kind of was the facilitator and just played off the ball, which I think he always wanted. I don't think he ever wanted to be the aggressor.
Yeah.
And then
he didn't want to dunk the ball on Trae Young, so I mean.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, man.
Yeah.
We all witnessed that one. That was, whew.
Yeah.
Man, one other thing, too, I want to add to this. Mm-hmm. They did end up trading Fultz to the Magic in 2019. Got on Jonathan Simmons. They needed a defender at the time. It gave him a first-round pick. You know what that pick became? Tyrese Maxey. So,
they kind of made up for it, I guess.
If you look at it in the full scope,
it
ended up working out for them. I still think Tatum, I love Maxey, but Tatum is a better player than Maxey.
Yeah.
You have to agree there. You messed up.
Yeah. Messed up big time.
So, sure. Nick, what do we got on this next one?
Yeah, so we're going to go with the San Antonio Spurs-Toronto Raptors trade. Everyone remember when Kawhi Leonard did not want to be in San Antonio no more. He wanted out, and he probably was faking injuries just to get out of there. He probably was at this point. And, Toronto, the signing Jerry, traded DeMar DeRozan, a guy that wanted to be a Raptor for life, a player that actually wanted to play in Toronto. And Jakob Poeltl in a first-round pick for Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard only plays with the Raptors for 1 year, but that 1 year brought him a championship. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy because, the good players that the Raptors have had in their career, Vince Carter, Chris Bosh, Tracy McGrady, those guys ended up jumping ship the moment they had the opportunity to.
Yeah.
DeMar DeRozan wanted to be a Raptor for life. And they traded that man. For a guy, Kawhi's I don't even want to be here. He wasn't even happy when he got traded to Toronto. And it's crazy that, they win a championship. He leaves the team that won the championship to just go to L.A.
Yeah. He was going to stay if they were able to get Paul George, but they would have had to give it on Pascal Siakam in the process, which Masai Ujiri was not going to do it.
No.
I think that this trade, it benefited Toronto more, for sure. San Antonio, if they were able to keep Kawhi Leonard, things could have been different for them. But they never would have gotten Victor Wembanyama. So
that's true.
You got to think about that. That pick ended up becoming Keldon Johnson. Keldon Johnson's a solid player.
Yeah.
I don't think that he's bad by any means. Yeah, DeMar wasn't the guy that he was in Toronto, but here's the reality, too. Even though he was putting up about the same numbers, that Spurs team is not what you had in Toronto. You had a team full of solid role players. Like you were talking about earlier with OG Anunoby, you had a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
So you got Pascal Siakam, you got Kyle Lowry, you got at the time Fred VanVleet, you had OG Anunoby, you had
Serge Ibaka on that team as well.
Serge Ibaka was on that team. You had Jonas Valanciunas because they hadn't gotten Marc Gasol yet. They actually got Marc Gasol the year they had Kawhi Leonard. So that's the other thing too is that they had a lot of guys on that team, and they just never were able to win with DeMar. And
they couldn't beat LeBron, that's why.
No, and the thing is that I love DeMar.
Yeah.
And I think his 3 seasons with Chicago were wonderful.
Yeah.
I appreciate every moment. The 50-point game I saw him against the Clippers was amazing.
Yeah.
He's a skilled player, but when we watched him in the playoffs, Nick, you and I both know he is not the guy that can lead your team to a championship. It just is. It's been proven time and time again in the playoffs that he is going to get shut down because he's a mid-range player. He cannot play outside of the arc, or he can't play. He can't play outside of the arc. So if you put him out there, he's not going to beat you. You have to lock up the mid-range, take that away from him, force him to shoot. And I think that because the Spurs never really did anything with DeMar. This trade looks bad, but I will give, Toronto gave up DeMar, who loved the city, like you said. And DeMar's from LA. So it's like you went from LA to Toronto and you said, hey, I love Toronto.
Yeah.
You don't got a lot of guys like that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, too, because DeMar DeRozan was actually on First Take this morning. He had an interview with Stephen A. and them. And Stephen A. brought up something. Let's say, because obviously they kept running into LeBron.
Yeah.
LeBron left to go to the Lakers that year. My question to you is, say that trade never happened. Let's say DeMar was still in Toronto.
Sure.
Does the Raptors make the finals that year?
No, they would have lost to the Sixers. I think that they make that first round series. Let's just say if we look at it, because the Raptors...
They would have been like a top 3 seed because they were always like a great regular season team.
Yeah. So if you think about it, because the Bucks had the number 1 seed that year. Mm-hmm. We'll keep them there. Yeah. Let's say Toronto still goes 2, right? Because they were the 2nd seed that year. I'm thinking about it in this matchup. You don't have Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
Who's in that Game 7 shot? I get it was a lucky bounce shot, but if you don't have Kawhi Leonard, that was his greatest like playoff run of his career. Mm-hmm. Bro, you needed like every bucket that guy gave you. Yeah. Especially against the Bucks. Even if they beat the Sixers in that series, let's just say, which I think would have been hard because
who's good guard Giannis?
Exactly. And the thing was too is like DeMar's not a great defender. No. Jimmy Butler's going to be cooking his ass. So I just think like you win that first round series. It wasn't a hard matchup.
So you're saying they would have lost to Philly in the second round?
I think they would have lost to Philly. Yeah. You think they're going to beat Philly? I don't know, man. That team that year with Jimmy was on one in that second round. So
I probably would lean towards Philly. I would. Even if Toronto, just like you said, if they did win the series, because remember too, Toronto was down 0-2 with Kawhi.
Yeah,
everyone was like, "Holy shit, Bucks are going to the finals."
Yeah,
this is wraps.
Yeah, that's.
And as soon as they put Kawhi on Giannis, it was over.
Yeah,
I don't know why I took to Game 3 to realize, oh my god, Kawhi Leonard's the best on-ball defender in the league. It's like, why don't we just put him on Giannis?
And the thing is with Giannis is like run and dunk.
Yeah,
he doesn't have like crazy like crafty game.
Yeah,
so. Yeah, it's just another thing too where when you think about it, DeMar is a lovable guy, but he just is never going to be that guy.
Yep, I agree.
I think, Nick, there are no other like crazy trades. One little trade I would like to point out here would be, I think this one. I think that the Portland Trailblazers, I could give them more than just I could give them 2. I think one of the ones that they did, which I don't understand why anybody would choose to do this.
Yeah.
But you're just giving away good role players to a team that needed those role players for nothing.
Yeah.
Norman Powell, Robert Covington to the Clippers for Eric Bledsoe, who was at the tail end of his career, Keon Johnson, who? Justice Winslow, who never ended up amounting to what the experts said he was going to be when he got drafted, and then second round pick.
The Trailblazers have been awful at making trades. I mean, when they traded McCollum, they didn't get much. Mm-hmm. They traded for Damian Lillard. They didn't get much. The one thing they did get was Drew Holiday, and they ended up trading him right away because Drew goes, I don't want to play for this team.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because when they got Powell, they traded away Gary Trent Jr., Isaiah Stewart, Rodney Hood, Trevor Ariza, and a first-round pick.
Yeah.
And then you get that back for him? Like, Rocco was just a signing. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you traded away Powell and Covington, and you're getting basically nothing back, and that was when Damian Lillard was hurt, too.
Yep.
I just don't... In my head, it's just like... Even the Damian Lillard trade, I think about it now. How did you get more back for Drew Holiday
That's wild.
than Damian Lillard?
It's wild.
I just think about it.
Shit doesn't make any sense.
That's all. Like that's really what it comes down to. I think the Trailblazers are one of those teams, again, not a very well-run organization. I can't talk. The Bulls are not a well-run organization either. Dude, there's nothing you can say.
Sometimes they say the truth hurts, right, Graham?
Hey, bro, this truth is hurting a little too much, but hey, I'm not a Blazers fan, so I could not care less. You guys have a good time with whatever you're thinking over there, because, Scoot Henderson, bro, we'll be talking about him this year for sure.
No,
I don't think it'll be in a good way,
I was
but
definitely wrong about that so far. Unless if he really, really picks it up this next year, I
don't think he is, bro. I think that Scoot is gonna probably be one of those guys that we say, hey, he looked great in the G League, but he's not that guy.
You think he has a lot of similarities? I'm not gonna lie. I think he has a lot of similarities to Markelle Fultz. And all the hype coming out. Markelle just didn't pan out, and Scoot got picked second overall. He wasn't first; he was second overall behind Wemby, right?
Correct.
All that hype coming out of the G League. Oh, this guy's super athletic. Russell Westbrook, he can't shoot to save his life.
Do you remember how bad they wanted the Hornets to take Scoot Henderson?
Yeah. Or he got picked third. Excuse me. Miller went 2, right? And then
Brandon Miller went 2.
Yes.
And then Scoot went 3.
Okay. Yeah.
And I would say that. Yeah, because I remember that the Hornets, they were saying they're going to trade LaMelo, Scoot Henderson.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here, man? LaMelo is a better player than Scoot Henderson, even with LaMelo's tendencies and his injury-prone history. I think he's a more talented player than Scoot. I think Scoot's game just doesn't translate to the NBA. That's what it really comes down to.
Certain players, especially more bigs now these days, that can't shoot. I'm still questioning, how's Zach Edey's game gonna translate to the NBA? I mean, he got picked 8th overall by the Memphis Grizzlies. He can block shots. Yeah, he's a good free throw shooter. He can't shoot any mid-range jumpers. He ain't gonna be at the 3-point line nailing threes. So
I'm curious about his stamina. I'm really curious about that because he's 7.
He's like 7'4" or something.
Because I know I've said Taco Fall. I can't compare it because they're not the same player. I just think about a lot of guys that are a lot taller that I don't remember being endurance-wise very fast or mobile or really just being able to stay on the floor more than 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. I just wonder what's going to happen because the Grizzlies right now are kind of in a weird spot in terms of their bigs because Jaren Jackson Jr. was playing the 5 for the most part.
Yeah.
So, and they got rid of Steven Adams. And the guy that they had, they replaced him left. So I think I think that's going to be one for sure to look at. I hope that another guy actually that came out of the G League that ends up being good this year is Matas Buzelis. Yeah. I really hope so. DeMar said this guy's going to be a star.
Yeah.
So I hope DeMar's right about that, man. I'm hoping about it.
Yeah.
Nick, the season is about, like I said, a month away. Mm-hmm. We are almost back to NBA basketball, which means we got a lot of stuff to talk about. And I am very excited to talk about this upcoming season with you next episode.
Yep.
And we'll see what happens, man. I wouldn't even be able to tell you right now who my favorite is to win the NBA Finals this year because there's a couple teams that could. I don't necessarily think it could be Boston. I think it could be somebody else, but I will give Boston their flowers. I think that they definitely have the best chance to win, but I'm not going to put them as my team to win this year. So
you got a team out west then?
There's possibly one or two teams out west that I think that could challenge Boston for the championship this year. I don't think anybody out east. I think that Boston will definitely repeat into the finals because Milwaukee got worse, and I think while the Knicks got better, I don't think that they have enough to beat the Celtics when it comes to it. I think the only team that has a puncher's chance, like they like to say on TV, is the Sixers.
Yeah. I agree with that. It's I don't know, man. The Knicks, they can't be good, but Julius Randle ain't winning shit with him. I even think if Kristaps Porzingis does get hurt, I still think they at least make the finals, which is kind of it's just their guard depth is just unbelievable. Brad Stevens will cook up some trades.
Oh, and they just signed Lonnie Walker too.
Yeah, I mean, he's always looking for talent for sure.
Yeah.
But I will say, I don't think the Celtics are going to repeat. I think there's going to be a different champion crown.
There's been no parity, dude.
Yeah, no parity at all. I think Sam Presti is going to make a huge aggressive move at the deadline to just put them over the top. And I think you could see Oklahoma winning the NBA championship this year.
All right.
Get to the finals.
Hey, man. No. I respect it.
I think they got a great roster right now. My bad, but I think,
no, you're good.
I think with the trade to get Caruso was huge. I think that's a huge upgrade.
That was definitely
because
a huge upgrade.
Not only he could defend, but Giddey couldn't shoot, so Giddey had no use to being on the floor. But now Caruso could space the floor for Shea, and he could defend. I like Hawkinson, the guy they got from the Knicks. I know they overpaid the shit out of him, but they needed to fill
the size.
That role. They tried to get Andre Drummond. They tried to get him 4 or 5 second-round picks. I guess the Bulls didn't want to do it. The Bulls should have done it. They should have just took the picks, whatever. But Sam Presti is a wizard, dude. And with all these picks, eventually you're going to have to start using them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this is a year when he realizes, like, they were number 1 seed last year. He didn't make really any moves. I think he knew that this team wasn't ready to win the championship. I think this team is. I think if they could get another guy, I think they could win the championship this year.
Here's my one question before we hop off the pod right now. Mm-hmm. Who is that player? And
that's a good question. I would say, I think they got to get some sort of 2-guard.
You think 2-guard
on this team? I think it doesn't hurt to get more size on this team. I feel like any team never hurts to get extra size, right? But like I like Lou Dort, I like Caruso, like I like those guys that can defend and knock down threes. But like, I think they need another bucket getter. They need to get like I don't know who it is, but maybe like.
Do you know one name that comes to mind? Because Utah's going to probably continue to tank. Try to see if you can swing Jordan Clarkson just as like a guy that comes off the bench as a scorer.
Yeah,
like just throwing out. I feel his name has been in a lot of trade rumors for the last couple of years.
Yeah,
you know one I was just thinking about too. You were talking about size. I know this one's probably never going to happen, but let's just say that LeBron sucks this year, and he just starts, and the Lakers are just like, you know what, screw it, let's just blow it up, right? Yeah. Inquire about AD, man. I know this sounds crazy, but I can't think of any other big that's like, because the thing is that the Thunder have enough to trade, and if you want to have somebody who's going to be at least a rim defender for you, he's a perfect option.
Yeah.
If you're going to throw that much at somebody you consider like a star level player. Otherwise, I think that I do think that I would inquire with Portland about trying to acquire Robert Williams just as a defender. You know,
interesting.
I think that could be another one. It'll be curious to see what Sam Presti does. The 2-guard, we could see maybe Jalen Green becomes available.
That would be interesting. Or maybe one of those Pelican players could be interesting. I think there's just too much going on right now in New Orleans. Maybe they could get a veteran guard. Maybe they pick up like a McCollum or something. I don't know. But I do like where Oklahoma's at right now. I just think they're a piece away. I don't know what kind of piece it is, but I think they need to get a bucket getter. Like Jalen Williams is consistent. Chet Holmgren is consistent. But Shea's like the only bucket getter on the team. I feel like you need to get another option in there where it doesn't always have to be Shea with the ball in his hands late in the game. Everyone knows Shea's going to have the ball in his hands. Yeah. Take some pressure off of him, especially in crunch time situations. You know what I mean? That's why I felt like they lost to Dallas. Dallas had Luka and Kyrie. You know what I mean? Like, besides Shea, like, I just felt like Shea just had to do way too much. They put too much pressure on him. I think they got to ease the pressure somehow for him.
Dude, I did not think about this one. Bro, what if they're able to get Jared Allen not Jared Allen, sorry. Not Jared Allen, because Cleveland's not going to do that. I'm thinking Brooklyn.
Yeah.
What if they were able to get somebody like Nick Claxton, like just like as another like center type piece?
Yeah.
I'm just spitballing, man. So if you can think of anybody else, it would be crazy though if they did trade for Jared Allen though from the Cavs.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that, but could be a possibility.
Yeah.
I definitely know that Cleveland's had some unhappiness over there, so be interesting to see. One more take, Nick, I'm going to give before we sign off. I think that Minnesota, you talked about them with Ant Edwards, MVP season coming in.
Yep.
I think that they're going to at least make the Western Conference Finals again this year. I think depending on who they're matched up against, could be either them making the NBA Finals or losing the Western Conference Finals. I think if they play Dallas again, I don't think Dallas is winning. I don't think they're winning, but And I'm saying Dallas. I'm saying Dallas not winning. But I think that, like, if they play, I don't know, OKC, man, like, that would be an interesting series. I don't know if they win. I think OKC, if they can get one more piece, they're gonna definitely win.
I think it doesn't hurt to get one more big, but it also doesn't hurt to also get a bucket. Like a Jordan Clarkson would be perfect for this team.
Yeah. I think that there's a couple of guys that they could get, but I think that, like you said, the 2 guard, I think size. I think they really do need to get one more big because right now you got Isaiah Hartenstein, and I don't think Chet Holmgren is going to be enough in terms of size.
Yeah.
So if you can get somebody like, I think
DeAndre Drummond.
Yeah, the only problem is that Andre Drummond went back to Sixers, so it'll be hard for them to get him. But I think, like, you can always see, I mean, Walker Kessler could be a name that's out there in trade situations because apparently the Jazz would be willing to move on from him if they get the right offer. You know, Danny Ainge loves draft picks. I think Walker Kessler could be a candidate for that. Doesn't necessarily have to play 35 minutes a game. You can play him for 20 minutes, Isaiah Hartenstein for 20 minutes, and then if you need a closing the lineup, you can just have Chet Holmgren out there if you want. It's just going to be based on whatever the team is able to find or is able to acquire. And I think it'll be interesting to see who's going to be available this year during the trade deadline. I think there's going to be a lot of great things. So, guys, if you have not already, please subscribe to the podcast. We are available on Spotify and YouTube. If you have not, check out our Twitter page, X at ABNF Podcast, and our TikTok also at ABNF Podcast. And Nick, I just want to say, man, appreciate you as always. Absolutely, thank you for another great conversation today. Thank you guys for listening. If you have not, please share, like, comment, and let us know what you think of this episode and for future episodes. So for myself and for Nick, this is All Ball, No Foul. Thank you. Have a great night, and we will talk to you guys soon.